Welcome to Securing America with me, Frank Gaffney, the program that's a kind of owner's manual for protecting the country we love against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to God's glory and that of his kingdom. The plot sounds like something picked from or plucked from a spy thriller. Two operatives claiming to be U.S. security personnel but suspected of ties with foreign enemies were recently arrested. They had stashed a small arsenal in a luxury apartment near the U.S. Capitol from which they were cultivating relationships with White House Secret Service personnel. Who Haider Ali and Arian Taherzadeh are working for is unclear at the moment, but they may be part of an Iranian plot to exact revenge for the liquidation of the mullah's top terrorist, Qasem Soleimani. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is among those reportedly being targeted for assassination. Incredibly, a magistrate named Michael Harvey rejected prosecutors' request to jail these suspects, instead, releasing them to home detention. Since an inside tip foreshortened the investigation into their operation, we cannot fully assess the danger of doing so. To discuss all of this, to put it into a larger context of threats to our country, here inside the United States, whether engineered by foreign adversaries or domestic ones, I'm very pleased to welcome back one of our regulars. His name is Charles Sam Faddis. He's served our country with great distinction in a whole number of capacities. Notably, is an undercover Central Intelligence Agency operative. He knows his way around the business of, well, the tradecraft, I should say, really, of spying, running operations, and doing our nation's most secretive and sensitive work. Sam Faddis, it's great to have you with us, especially to have a chance to pick your brains about this subject, which I know you are focusing on like a laser at endmagazine.com. Welcome back, sir.
Great to be here, Frank, as always. Thank you.
So, Sam, who are these guys? What do we know about Ali and Taherzadeh, and what are their, likely ties, as far as we can tell?
Well, Arian Taherzadeh, I think, is a United States citizen and appears to have lived here at least most of his life. Ali represents himself as being Pakistani. It's unclear to me whether he's Pakistani or Bengali, but anyway. And look, both of the, here's the essence of it to me is that a lot of the media, I think, sort of wants to portray these guys as just kind of eccentric and grifters, and this is some kind of con. Um, Everything we know about these guys, the equipment they have, what they were doing, suggests that this is a lot more serious than that. To begin with, these guys weren't getting anything; they were actually giving things to other people. So a con usually is financially
Works the other way.
rewarding to the con men, not the other way around.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reason here, I think, to think that these guys could very well be Iranian operatives here to help the Iranians make good on the threats they've been making for 2 years now to get revenge for killing Soleimani, the Quds Force.
You mentioned in your piece at End Magazine about all this, Sam, that there is a, well, perhaps coincidental timing issue here with the start of this operation masquerading as U.S. Department of Homeland Security special, security officers, and you know Soleimani's liquidation, as I put it. Talk about that a little bit and how that might play into all of this.
Well, basically, this whole thing with these two seems to have kicked off about a month after Soleimani was killed by us. Again, the Iranians have made no secret of their intention to get revenge and get revenge in a very, very high profile, big way. Um, that, so we have that. We have the focus on the Secret Service. We have this intent to co opt the Secret Service. Ali has multiple trips to Iran, to Mashhad in Iran. Mashhad in Iran happens to be the location of an Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force base, which coincidentally, not coincidentally, trains Pakistanis that they recruit for operations on behalf of Iran abroad. One of the things they train people in there, they have a
Operations
40.
meaning terrorist operations, would you say?
Absolutely. I mean, the Quds Force is basically the arm of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, that carries out terrorist attacks abroad and works closely with terrorist groups like Hezbollah, actually creates terrorist groups. So one of the things they do in Mashhad is train snipers. They run a 45-day course there. I would note that in the apartment, one of the many incriminating things that was seized was a spotting scope, like are routinely used by sniper teams. I don't have any reasonable explanation why Ali, who is a Pakistani and represents himself as being a businessman in the United States, happens to bounce back and forth to Mashhad, Iran. Of course, as you know, since this all unresolved at this point.
Yeah, it is unresolved, and that's something I want to come back to. But just one other data point, and I can't remember whether it was in your reporting or others, but there was apparently a time when this chap Ali was boasting that he worked for Pakistani intelligence, the so-called ISI. Is that confirmed as you understand it?
It is confirmed definitely that he was claiming to be Pakistani intelligence, and I would say there are a lot of indicators here that at least somebody, if not both of them, at least one of them, had some significant tradecraft training. There are things that they have done here that show these guys were pursuing things in a pretty analytical, pretty organized way, the way a trained operative would.
Right, including understanding surveillance and how to counter efforts to surveil their activities.
Absolutely.
And Sam, you spent a lot of time in Pakistan when you were with the agency. How formidable an adversary is the Pakistanis' ISI?
Well, the ISI is definitely a very formidable, very large, and really in many ways a very professional organization, if they are in fact involved in this. I mean, at this point, I guess I have a question mark as to whether there is legitimacy to that, or Ali was making that representation because somehow that was advancing his other agenda. I just don't know.
Okay, and you mentioned that Mashhad is a place that the Quds Force of Iran trains Pakistani operatives. Is there reason to believe that there might actually be some uh, direct cooperation between these two arms of jihadist governments, albeit the Pakistanis being of the Sunni stripe and the Iranians, of course, being of the Shiite?
Well, I mean, as I understand it, the actual Iranian interest section in the nation's capital is housed in the Pakistani embassy in Washington D.C. So we have that's a
There,
pretty good
there is
nexus.
some cooperation. That's right. That would be a tell, I think, in the intelligence business. Um, One of the other things that you've mentioned, Sam, in one of your pieces is evidence that these guys may have been able to operate another, well, safe house, if you will, besides this luxury apartment they had blocks from the Capitol. Give us just a quick rundown on that, if you would.
Well, as you indicated, these guys figured out when the FBI put surveillance on them in advance of busting in and raiding the place. These guys were able to detect that surveillance and were aware they were under surveillance. And they began to move items out of the apartment, mail them out because they knew they couldn't walk out the front door without being stopped, but they figured the FBI wasn't searching the mail. They started to take, obviously, therefore, what are the most incriminating things and get rid of them. One of the things they mailed were empty weapons cases for weapons that were not located in the apartment. So nothing but the plastic boxes you get a pistol in when you buy it. They're not illegal, but they wanted to get rid of those. That was their number one priority. Why? Because the FBI wouldn't find those weapons, and that would mean the FBI would know, well, those weapons are somewhere else, which means we have another safe house.
Hold that thought, Sam. We'll be right back with more with Sam Faddis right after this.